one thing I know about real estate, it's that every single transaction is going to be completely different. And yet there's a lot of things that we can do to make sure that our transactions are as smooth as possible despite their differences. My name is Kiana Burgos. I'm a local Delaware realtor, and I have had my fair share of some challenging situations in my real estate transactions, and yet I've closed them all. I've made sure that we've got to the closing table, even if we had an issue 24 hours before closing, 2 hours before closing, we got it to the table and we closed. The biggest issues that we see in a real estate transaction that often leads to termination of the contract is the inspections. The inspection period is typically a short period of time after you go under contract in which you can get the inspection done, go over your report, and get those repair lists back to your seller. And so everything is happening in a pretty short period of time, anywhere from 7 to 14 days typically. And so with all of that stuff happening so soon after you go under contract, you can feel very insecure during this process. I'm talking, you're getting the report back and you're seeing things that you had no clue were wrong with the home. When you walk through the home, you didn't see any of these issues. And now you're worried, is this home broken? Is there something wrong with this? Should I not go ahead and purchase this? While that may be the case sometimes you can get those things negotiated. But of course, that's another thing. You might be worried that you're asking for too much, or the cost to repair it is too much, or maybe it might not get done within the time that you wanted the house to be sold and in your ownership. There's a lot of things that we can do to try and mitigate these issues. If you have a seller who's willing to get a pre-inspection report and they're willing to provide that to you before you go under contract, that is super helpful, especially if it's a reputable brand. That's another important thing. You want a reputable brand, especially in a small area like this. A lot of people will be able to tell you insider information about any of the brands around us that do inspections. There's a lot of amazing ones, and yet there are some who may not have your best interest at heart. You want to make sure that you're using the best one possible. Go and look for the best reviews. Ask other homeowners who they used. You want to know that that person's going to care for you and your home inspection as if it were their own home, as if it were their child's home, their brother's home. You want to make sure that they care. Another thing you can do is you can pre-negotiate your limits. So if you don't want to ask your seller to pay an egregious amount of money afterwards, after you've already negotiated your contract, you can put in that pre-terms that you are only going to ask for up to this amount, or anything below this amount you're okay with handling. There's a lot of different ways that you can make that work so that you feel secure and that they don't feel like they're being taken advantage of. As I mentioned with the inspections, there's deadlines that you have to meet within your contract. Sometimes it has to do with the loan that you're getting approved. Sometimes you're doing cash and there's other things that need to be met. You need to make sure that your title is free and clear. You want to make sure that that inspection is getting done. You want to get that clear to close before you close so that you're making sure your loan's going to be funded. There's so many things that you're going to have to remember all these dates. And again, these are typically happening in 30 to 45 days. There's so much going on. You're packing your house, you're getting ready to move. All these things, you want to make sure that you know exactly when those dates are so that you can either get it done beforehand or make sure that you're at least meeting them. And so one thing that I like to make sure that I do for my clients is send them a Google Calendar invite with those specific dates. I also send a follow-up email that has all of those dates specifically listed, highlighted, bolded, and italicized so that they know exactly what to be keeping an eye out for, and they know that they're going to be getting those Google Calendar invites from me with all those important dates. Like I said, there's so much going on that you want to make sure that you remember all of that stuff. The last thing you want is to remember last minute that you forgot a deadline and then you can't negotiate something anymore, or you have to push the closing back. You don't want to have to do any of those things, so being on top of your dates is beyond important. Another big one is appraisals. You want to make sure that your house is going to get funded for the amount that you went under contract for. You don't want it to go too over, and you definitely don't want it to go too under. So there's a lot that can be done with this. Making sure that the appraisal is getting done properly. Your seller agent can make sure that they leave comps at the house so that makes the appraiser's job just a little bit easier. Even if they don't necessarily use those exact comps, it does make the job easier so that they know what you were looking at to justify the pricing that you provided. You also want to make sure that you can, if you need it, to give yourself a little bit of a gap of extra funds if you needed to fund it a little bit extra if your appraisal goes over. If you really want the house, you'll make sure that you do that. One of the biggest things I always tell people is do not go at the tippy top of your approval. You want to make sure you have a little bit of room for other things so that you're not spending, one, all your money, and two, you're making sure that you're more secure in your purchase. Getting your loan approved and getting the funding for that loan is also a very important step in the transaction if you're getting a loan. And so you want to make sure that, like I've said before in my other videos, working with a local lender is typically going to be doing you better. They're going to have more time for you. They know what's happening in our local area. They know the possible options that you have for possibly getting money to help you and assist you within your purchase. So there's a lot of things that you want to make sure that they can help you. And if you have someone who's very thorough and is practically doing all this stuff beforehand, before you even get under contract, to make sure that you're as approved as possible, it's more likely that you're going to be able to get that fully funded and get to the table. And so making sure that they get those documents to you. If you don't know if your client is sending those documents, make sure you're checking in with your mortgage lender. And if you as a client are worrying, did I send everything? Like, is everything good? Make sure you contact your lender. Ask them if they have every single thing that they need. If there's something else that they need, make sure you send it to them as soon as possible. The longer you wait to send them documents or important information, the longer it's going to take on their end to make sure that the loan gets approved. And you don't want to make anything wait a little bit longer because you never know what could happen. If something needs to be worked on, if you need to send more information, the sooner you get that done, the better. Top-notch communication, very important when you're going through the funding process. You want to make sure that your funds aren't changing. That means not getting a random large deposit from somebody. You have to account for that. You want to make sure that you're not getting a new line of credit. Don't buy a new car, don't buy furniture on your credit card. Wait to do that stuff until after your loan has been funded. Things like that can make everything change, and every last penny counts when you're getting approved and when you're getting that loan approved as well. So you want to make sure that you're not changing anything last minute. Having other contingencies as well is something that you need to make sure that you're well aware of. So if you're the seller and you have someone who's also selling a home, either in this state, another state, wherever, that's a contingency that you want to make sure that you possibly have a backup plan for that. You never know. That house could end up never selling. They could get under contract and it could fall through the day that you have closing. There are so many different possibilities. So taking backup offers, keeping in communication with the other agents who've shown that property is all very important. And you as a buyer, if you're going to be, or a seller, you want to feel secure in that as well. So if you have someone on the other side who is selling their home to make sure that they can fund this, or selling their home so that they can get to the next one, you just want to make sure that you're as secure as possible. You want to know their important dates. You want to make sure that you know everything going on so that everything can coincide and make sure that it all works out together. Especially down south is those land leases. And sometimes those land lease properties are in communities in which you need to be approved to be in that community. So if that's another thing that you need to be worrying about, you want to make sure that you get that approval from them quick so that it's not holding anything up. There's lots of cases like that around here, so being as well informed from your agent as possible is very important. The last, and honestly one of the most important things, is making sure that the agents are working together. You want to make sure they're working together to get to the end. Having a good agent on the other side is going to make things miles easier than if you have an agent who has an ego or isn't a team player. It can make things so hard. So make sure you're picking the right agent who can work well with others, because if you need to find a solution to something last minute and you have two people who are just trying to make sure that both clients are satisfied, that's going to be amazing. But if you have one person who is only worried about the paycheck that they're getting at the end of the day, that might not be the best option for you, and that could end up killing a deal when it wasn't necessary. Communicate well between each other and are keeping each other informed on any happenings on either side, even if it's just a text every week saying everything is good on our side. That is going to make things so much easier because you can relay that information to your client, like, hey, everything is good. We're good on your side, we're good on their side, we're just waiting and chugging along to get to that closing date. It'll be a super exciting time, and while it can be stressful, you want to make sure that you're as happy as possible. You're buying a home, and so making sure that you keep an eye on these things and make sure that your agent is informed, and having a great agent on your side is going to make this so much better. So if you need an agent here in Delaware who's going to be making sure they have your best interest at heart, you can always contact me with my information below.